AI in Genomics and Precision Medicine. And it's going to be a very interactive course lecture today. So I would expect a lot of people participating in the chat with very simple questions just to make sure that we are on the same page. But before I start, I see that Labenimo Patrick just joined, so I would actually introduce him and then have him give the first part of the lecture, and then I will join, I'll give the second part of the lecture. So, Labenimo, are you there? There you are. Wonderful. So I would like to introduce Labenimo Patrick. Labenimo is actually been working with us. He has been working at the Global Health Catalyst. He's been at Johns Hopkins. He's worked at Rutgers, and he currently has a master's degree and has done work on computer science in biology. Labenimo, I don't know if I'm doing justice, but if you feel free to further introduce. What's really remarkable is that he really has this huge, great global perspective of really engaging young people. He actually has created a young catalyst club, and he can talk about that. And so he's really invested in education and empowering, even young people to get involved in global health. He has done some work with me with the Lancet that's been accepted to be published in the Lancet. And today he's going to talk about some of that work on AI across Africa. But then after that, I will talk a little bit more broadly about AI in genomics and how some collaborations with Africa can actually help. So I'm going to hand over to you, Labenimo.
Good morning, Dr. Will, and thank you very much I think you did justice to the introductions, and good morning to all the participants, the panelists, and it might be afternoon or evening for those who might not be in the US or certain parts of the US. I'm Labenimo, originally from Nigeria, and as Dr. Will rightly said, I'm an alumni of Rutgers University. I have a degree in computational biology, and I'm also an alumni of Drew University, where I did some theology work. So I have also a master's in theology, and Africa University, where I also did some work in medical laboratory sciences. So we are many caps. Right now I do some work as a minister in a Methodist church in the Catskill in New York. But I've also done research in mitochondrial research and also computational biology. So I'm happy to share some of the work that we've done with Dr. Will regarding artificial intelligence in Africa. And yeah, I will share my screen and we can get on with it.
Yeah, you should be able to share your screen.
Just let me know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see the PowerPoint.
All right, sounds good. Okay. So as I said, my name is Labenimo Patrick, and I'll be walking you through the recent work that we did on the landscape of AI across Africa. I'm not going to give you the entire thing. I would show you some of the important data that we we're able to get from our work with Dr. Will and a lot of other colleagues from different institutions. But before then, because I'm not, I don't know the audience very much, I just want to say a few things about AI. And yeah, so let me just do this. We know that this is a very hot topic in our world right now, artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence just means you're using machines programmed to think like humans and kind of mimic our actions. And so there are different branches of artificial intelligence. You can think about things like machine learning. When you're talking about machine learning, you're looking at the ability of the system that you design to be able to automatically detect patterns in data that you fed to it. And in some instances, you can have things like deep learning, where now it's making adaptations to itself to kind of learn and make a little bit of a rational decision. And so I just have this Boston dynamic. Those of us who are AI fanatics, you would see this kinds of robot down at the bottom corner here. Typically, when you look at AI videos on TikTok or other social media, you would see them walking around, and people have always talked about how they can be used for all kinds of things. And in terms of its application, we know that there's a lot of talk about ways in which we can use them to ease our lives. And so I just have a little bit of a picture of a robot to the left trying to make a hamburger over there. I think that would be cool. The concern about that will be replacing jobs and people losing their jobs. But essentially, there's a lot of work that artificial intelligence could be able to do. And so you can think about engineering, you can think about our communications, you can think about healthcare, which will be very huge. You can think about manufacturing and some of the repetitive work that we humans do. We can delegate some of that to robots. So there's a lot of applicability when it comes to how artificial intelligence can be used to improve our conditions or help us live a much more easier and, I think, great life as humans. You can also categorize artificial intelligence into different categories. Some of them are narrow AI, which is just you design that kind of AI just so that it can independently do very specific things. You can think about general AI, where you design them so that they can perform similar levels of things that humans can do. So for example, you think about your generative AI models like ChatGPT. Those of us who know how great that robot or that chat box is. You can also think about something that is super intelligent. Right now, that does not exist, but that is something that has been talked about. You can also think about AI in the form of your Netflix. Those of us who watch Netflix, you watch, say, The Vikings or Game of Thrones, and you see multiple movie suggestions similar to that. Or your YouTube, you're listening to Coldplay and you see similar suggestions by YouTube. So those are reactive mission AI. They kind of react to some of the things, algorithms, or you're talking about something and you see an ad on Facebook about whatever you're talking about. So those kinds of AI models are reactive AI models. And there are certain ones like theory of AI, mind AI, where you're thinking about ways in which we can use AI to respond to human emotions, right? So those kinds of AIs also do not exist yet, but that would be very interesting to see how we can develop such kinds of AI, because maybe perhaps can be used for some of our problems. But I imagine that would be a long way. We also have self-aware AI. Those of us who watch certain movies, we might have seen Sophia with Will Smith, Hanson Robotics. There's lots of robotics like Terminator. Those are kind of like self-aware AI. So those are categories of artificial intelligence that either is being thought about or either is already existing or something that we see already in our world. So yeah, the current ones that we already have: narrow AI, artificial general intelligence, reactive AI models, and limited memory AI. So those are the ones that currently we have, and there's still a lot of work around the other ones that I just mentioned. Now, there are lots of, you can't talk about AI without talking about the limitations, lots of limitations of AI, but I'm not gonna sit and highlight that. I'm pretty sure that a Google search would give you those limitations, but I'm just gonna use one here. One of the things about AI is that if you give it bad data, what you expect is also a different output. So you look at this penguin elephant, and the AI puts a combination of that, right? So there's a replicability problem if you give it like a bad information. If you give it information, it just doesn't work like us. If you give somebody something wrong, it knows that it's wrong if the person knows what exactly you want to give it. But with AI, sometimes it can be a little bit of a problem. So that can be a challenge in a lot of ways, meaning it can be used for a lot of malicious intent. And so that is a big issue with AI. And you can talk about other things when it comes to the challenge, but I just want to highlight one of the big issues or challenges with AI as it relates to data. Now, so for our paper, we were looking at the current state of this particular paper was looking at the current state of digital health and artificial intelligence innovation in Africa. And essentially, I'm just going to tell us what we did in terms of the data collection, and then I'll just run through the data real quick. So given that those of us know Africa, given a lot of reasons that you would imagine that there might be challenges there, but we're trying to look at what is going on in terms of research activity as it relates to artificial intelligence on the African continent. And so for methodology, we decided that we would use, we'll do a review, basically use existing literature to see the research activities based on the different countries, but also importantly, how much research output is there that is already existing in Africa. And we're looking at a time frame of 10 years, 10-year period. And we also wanted to make sure that we're looking at original research and how do you do that? To be able to do that, what you do is you look at the affiliations, the university affiliations, because when you publish papers, there's a lot of affiliations. So we looked at university affiliations. So when you do a simple Google search, you would see a lot of things. You see, let me just show you this. So for example, so in our case, we did a PubMed search, and you could see that from just roughly, you might see it seems as though you see an increment in terms of the research on AI in Africa. A simple PubMed search will show you that there's a lot of papers. The issue though with this is that some of them are just collaborative research, say for example, Harvard and University of South Africa or something like that. But we wanted to make it that the papers we're looking at is specific to institutions that are on the continent. The research was done by lecturers or researchers on the continent, and very little to no affiliations with folks up in the West or the East. So, so a simple search, this is the results you see, 2014, you see this upward trend, and between 2010 to 2004, there's this high yield, like a lot of research being put out there. But this is just a rough PubMed search, artificial intelligence, you put in artificial intelligence and you see this, lots of papers, and you can always go through it. So we compile the numbers and you see this increase. But really, if you narrow it down to what we were looking at, essentially, you see a very, I just did a comparative map here for you to see. So to the right here, what you're looking at is, actually I messed up the caption, sorry about that. But to the right there, what you're looking at, you're seeing the incidence rate per 10,000 in Africa for stroke. And to the left is our map that we did a heat map where we're looking at the number of publications based on each African, sub-Saharan African country. So we kind of ruled out some of the countries up north for reasons that we thought was important to the kind of work we're trying to do. But if you look at it, it's not a lot. The country that had considerably within range of like 30 papers, original papers on artificial intelligence, healthcare, and oncology, because we narrowed it down to that because that was where our interest was. It was South Africa and a few countries that pop up there. You can see on the map, this is probably know the map of Africa. You see Ethiopia, Kenya, Nigeria, and Ghana. And so it shows that there's very little, very little to comparatively very little research work that is done. And if you're comparing it with incidence of disease, like say stroke, as you see in the map to the right, that's a very little research activity. And this is, we're looking at a 10-year period, basically. So that shows you how much lagging is there when it comes to research in healthcare and in oncology. But like I showed you in the previous, in this map, when you just do a random search where you don't exclude research activity with collaborative work with the West or the East, other parts of the country, you see a very huge amount popping up on the search engine. But if you try to narrow it down specifically to original research, you see a very different output. So so that's where we went with that part. So if anything, if there's any takeaway from this map, this particular heat map that I'm showing you, it shows you that there's very little to know in some parts of very little research activity as it relates to artificial intelligence, healthcare, and oncology. And that was the area that we were really wanting to look at as it relates to the paper we published with Lancet Oncology. And then here is just being even more specific. We took out the artificial intelligence. We just took out particularly papers that are published in AI and healthcare, artificial intelligence, healthcare, and cancer. We did like a graph, and you can see 2015, not very much work being done, 2016. And you're looking at, this is a country, Africa is a huge continent. You're looking at 53 to 54 countries, if I'm right. So that's a very alarming statistics for us. And then in 2020, during COVID, artificial intelligence, there's a lot of talk around it. And you see this a little bit of a steep increase in the numbers. So I would say we were very surprised at the result of the search that we did. And we kind of thought about all kinds of conclusions that we could make out of this. But the paper we publish has some conclusions. And if you want to look more detailed into it, you can essentially take a look at it. But this tells us that there is very little research work done around artificial intelligence, healthcare, and AI on the African continent. And we know that the incidence of disease on those in that part of the world says different. It's high, and it tells us that there's need, right, for us to address some of the issues that might be the reason where we have very little to no publications here. Now, just going to touch base, which would be closing to my final slide before I let Dr. Will take over. One of the things that you can also think about as you think about AI and the challenges that comes with the kind of research on the African continent is the idea of this genomics, right? And genomics, you're looking at using AI tools to be able to study the genome or the genetic makeup of an organism. And we think that, looking at African genomics might also be something that it might be interesting when you're thinking about this emergence of precision medicine and the relationship between that and artificial intelligence. And there are a few papers also published, very interesting papers also published in Nature. And if you do PubMed search, you'll see a few papers, but these are just a few ones that I just wanted to highlight, where they're talking about trying to address this lack of data and some of the challenges. And what they've done in this paper is, in some cases, they do workshops to tell people why being able to empower people to do work around AI and artificial intelligence is very important. And they also highlight some of the challenges, which would be resources, lack of expertise, and very, very limited, and policy, which is a big part of it. There's limitation when it comes to policy, and so the need to reach out to policymakers about some of those challenges. And so it is important that we find ways to address some of these concerns. I think to conclude, all of this is to say while there is a significant amount of work and progress made in the West and in the East Asia, in very developed countries, developing countries within the African continent are lacking the resources to do this. And I think it is important that we think about ways in which we can address some of these challenges. It's not a one single challenge. It's going to take a lot of work from individuals here, those listening on the Zoom meeting, and researchers and policymakers to be able to try to see that we put out a lot of research work, because Africa is very diverse. There's a lot of diversity in the genetic makeup. It's not one single one size fit all. So there's a lot of diversity. You think about the languages, the different regions, all kinds of genetic makeup. So if we want a representative world where we're thinking about genomics and we're thinking about healthcare and oncology, treatment, diagnosis, things like palliative care, we gotta invest more and do more as it relates to doing AI work on the African continent. And also it's important to also note that the population is pretty it's a younger population, so it's good investment for farmers as well. And so yeah, so I think so far, if you want to more details on it's a 14-page paper, or between 14 and above. If you want more details on the work, you can reach out to me and I can send you the link. But so far, this is the things I thought I can highlight for the time that was given. And just want to say thank you for those of us listening, and Dr. Will and the panelists. And if there are any questions, please do not hesitate to post them to me. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Labenimo. I think before, I transition into the genomics portion of the lecture, just give a little time to see if anybody has questions for you. I think one thing was really striking to see that it's only recently, that there's that steep curve in increase in activity around AI across the African continent. Basically before 2014, it looks like there's nothing, obviously based on this research activity. So, is there any, do you think there's a reason behind that from the work that we did or from your own insights? Can you, and there's that big jump around the time of COVID. Is it just because that's when the AI revolution started, or it's because something happened? Do you know?
A good question. I like to imagine that, I don't know the right saying, but they say a necessity is the mother of creativity or invention, something along those lines. During COVID, everybody was locked down, and so people are trying to find ways to entertain themselves, and people became acquainted with computers. What can I do with my computer? What can I create, right? So you imagine that people are trying to make life easier and use code and all kinds of things, and I think that's why we had so much of the AI boom. But also how how people realize you could actually make life easier with this machine. All you need to do is your cup of coffee, and the machine can do the work for you. That would be great. So on the African continent, I imagine that a lot of the boom within that period is maybe perhaps, and this is just my personal guess, opinion, maybe perhaps people imagined that there's going to be some monetary value to it when it comes to investing in AI. And it is true. The most valuable company now is NVIDIA. What do they make? They make the supercomputers, these chips. And so people thought, well, perhaps maybe this is our way out. Like we need to make money out of it. So maybe perhaps I think people began to pay attention to it during the COVID era and post-COVID. But even so, if you look at, again, the comparatively, it's still very low in terms of the research output and in terms of the engagement. So I think we need to do more. We have to do
Yeah.
more. Yeah.
Yeah, and I hope that, lectures or courses like this, for those who are participating, and I think there is a really important opportunity for collaboration between the US, from Europe, Southeast Asia, you mentioned, in Africa and South America. Like, collaboration is really critical for AI because of the data. You need to have really diverse data sets, otherwise there's the bias, which is something that we'll talk about a little bit when we talk about genomics. But I think, like you mentioned, there is this tremendous opportunity for more work to be done. There's definitely a lot of, I would say Africa is lagging behind, but hopefully this kind of courses can spark those who are attending to, get involved in this area. It is the future. So.
Yeah, and I just want to add that, to run this AI stuff, you need a lot of data centers. And data centers, oh my God, it takes a lot of water. And I was speaking to my mom, in Nigeria yesterday. It's water, people are looking for water to drink. So there's all those challenges, really. In the US, there's all these large data centers, but even in the US, lots of communities are complaining about how much data in Texas, how much these data centers are using their water. You're looking at data centers, you're looking at electricity. So
So the AI drinks water?
yeah, you have to use a lot of water gallons of water to cool these systems, but also you need electricity to keep them on, because data centers don't have, and we don't have that. The capacity is really, really, we're not close to that. So it would be very impossible to some degree if we don't fix like basic problems like that. Except if we want to put a data center in the US and then run the company in Nigeria or Cameroon or other places. So those are some, I guess, like basic level stuff that we need to address before like the actual policy is good. I think we need policies to attend to it. Somebody mentioned policy, and I'm saying, yeah, we need policies to be able to address that. But I think the challenges are just massive. But in terms of research, we don't need data centers to do research. We can do it from anywhere. Research nodes, without electricity, you can still do some of this research. You just need a computer. So
you just need a computer with cloud computing or fast computer, like NVIDIA has all of those things, right? Some of those chips are being used for, if you get a good computer, you can even do all of those computational stuff in the cloud. So it's good. All right. I don't see, is there any questions? Saif, do you see any questions for Labinimo? Otherwise, I can transition. Okay.
Yes, I think we have one question that came in. So the question is, are there any workshops or webinars that can factor government policymakers so as to improve awareness?
So one of the when I did the slide on genomics, one of the slides, published in Nature, it's a group, I think it's AfroBioGene. It's this group that's advocating for artificial intelligence and AI and research, molecular research. And they seem to be doing a lot of workshops in different countries to empower younger people about the need for artificial intelligence. In terms of policymakers, I'm not sure there's that part, there's that, I'm not sure, I'm not aware of any organization that is doing that. But if that is something that, if we can empower the youth to see that AI is important and is the future, I think you don't need to do a workshop for the youth can write to their representatives and kind of say, before we elect you, you got to prioritize this, right? Like you could do it if you tell. So how things get done is, the individuals in a county or a country or state say, this is our priority, you got to solve it, or else we're not going to elect you. So I think what they're doing, empowering the youth to say, they see the need for this is good, but also even the researchers can also press the policymakers. And I think that'll be huge because, again, infrastructure in Africa is lacking. So if we don't have policymakers investing money into that, then we'll be left behind. I think this is one race that we have a chance to catch up with. But already, I mean, there's billions already invested in the US, China, the UK, and Europe. So, but we need to kind of call our policymakers and let them know how much this is important, because I think Africa needs it, actually. We need it more than you think, right? A lot of the things we do is very manual. My mom, she still cooks with firewood. So imagine if she can get help with some AI carrying the firewood back home. That would be a lot. Be a lot helpful. We still carry a lot of our water from the river and all that stuff. If you have a machine robot to do that for you, I'm sure my mom would be excited to vote for anyone who would promise that. So anyway, I think if we can empower the people to see the need for it, they can get their policymakers to do that. The policymakers, not so much. I don't think they would want to sit down and hear researchers talk about it. If you invite them like Dr. Will does for Global Health Catalyst, maybe, but a lot of them just want to talk about their politics and all of that stuff. So yeah, I don't know if that answers, but good
Yeah, it's
question.
actually an important point. I mean, I think there's that need for engagement with policymakers, partly elaborating more, yeah, that demand can come from, the people. But we actually need to do that active engagement, absolutely, because some of the policies around AI need to be really, each country need to realize the importance of it. I mean, for one thing, the US now is really investing into this, and I think this is a tremendous opportunity, for collaborations as well. And I think that will actually spark some changes, and get some other countries to get involved. So the Lancet Commission we did with Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia series, we actually are encouraging the government policymakers to get involved with this because it can really leapfrog, so anyway, thanks again, Labinimo. I really appreciate you. You can stay on, maybe we'll have some additional questions towards the end, but I'm going to transition now and talk a little bit about what you touched on at the end of your lecture, of your first part of the lecture, which is really, around genomics, and this is something that, if you think about AI, it's one of the biggest areas that people think is going to be, transformative application around genomics. But I'm going to start. So this is going to be a quick part of the lecture, but, like going through this, it's going to be very, let me say, engaging. Would like to hear from you guys in the chat what you're thinking. And so we're just going to run through 5 quick sections of this. AI applications in genomics. What are those? What are personalized medicine? How can you apply AI for personalized medicine? And then talk about how, through your wearables, you can actually use the Internet of Things, to personalize your healthcare, and all these wearables. And then we're going to look at a case study, actually think about how we can apply a great world example today where you can use AI, in genomics. And then we'll talk a little bit about ethical considerations to the policy thing we talked about, right? So there's a lot of ethics around the use of AI, and I think that's where policymakers, that was an important question, really need to get involved because, the people need to have their ethics and privacy and all of those things taken into consideration. So we're going to start with the first question. Since this is about AI in genomics, just like Labinimo started with a very good grounding of what AI is. So let's think about what genomics is. So if somebody were to ask you what's genomics, how is that best defined? So I have one more questions for you here. A, genomics is the study of how environmental factors influence gene expression without changing the DNA sequence. B, the study of all the genes, the genome, in an organism, including their structure, function, evolution, and mapping. C, a technique used to manually modify individual genes in the lab for research purposes. And D, a branch of medicine focused on diagnosing genetic disorders using family history alone. So I would like to see what people think. Probably very easy question, but please type the letter for the correct answer in the chat. All right, fantastic. I see, yeah, everybody, most people say B. I haven't seen any different answer, and that's correct. So that's great. The answer is truly B. So B, genomics is the study of all the genes of the genome in an organism, including their structure, their function, evolution, and mapping. So as I think about AI in genomics, you need to think about how we can leverage AI to do this study. Because we're going to talk about personalized medicine as well. I have a question here about personalized medicine. This is a buzzword. It's really, people like this word. You can say sexy word that people use in medicine a lot, personalized medicine. So there are a number of possible answers to this. What is personalized medicine? A system where all patients receive the same standard treatment regardless of their genetic differences. B, medicine prescribed only by AI algorithms without human input. C, a medical approach that tailors treatment to an individual's genetic makeup, environment, and lifestyle. And D, a traditional medicine system based on herbal remedies from different cultures. Keep the answers coming. Let's see what you guys think here. Fantastic. Yeah, most of you pick C, and in fact, I'm not seeing a different answer there. So yes, a medical approach that tailors treatment to an individual's genetic makeup, environment, and lifestyle. So great guys. This is wonderful. So now let's think about the future. Benjamin was talking about how his mom can have a robot who can carry his water, fetch firewood, and do other things for him. That's really the future. Thinking about that happening, right? We see that in science fiction, but I actually don't think it's too far off. So what if AI could decode your entire genome and predict your future health risks before you are even born? Would society be ready for that? That's the big question. I don't really expect you to answer it, but I want you to provoke your imagination here. So think about it. So when you are still in your womb, your mom is carrying you. We can actually already have AI, tell us what is the future of your healthcare risk. Are you going to develop cancer in your lifetime, or you're going to get heart disease, or you're going to get diabetes, or you're going to get any of those things? And potentially even at what age you're going to get that disease, and even using that, let's not really say that, but you can actually then recommend what kind of interventions or the foods or the things you should do to avoid changing that, to avoid that happening. So, that's actually, that question sounds futuristic, but that's actually what a lot of the work on AI in genomics right now is focusing on, where you could just take your genetic makeup, combine that with your zip code, where you're living, your economics, your environment, the foods you eat, and we can predict how long you're going to live, or what kind of diseases you're going to get. And so, that's the kind of future, thought-provoking future that I want you guys to think about here. So what this really does, it now opens up the questions of, for example, ethics. What's the ethical implications of that? Imagine if you were in your mother's womb, and then they realize that, okay, when you're going to be born, you're going to get all these, should we intervene? Is that something that, do you actually, some people don't even want to know the sex of their baby before it's born. So, that's some people's choice, and that should be respected. And so, but if you want to know about all the risk that you're going to get, in your lifetime. Is that an ethical concern? And then are the healthcare systems prepared for them? You just saw the data that LabAnimo presented. If you look at around African countries, and I would say we've seen this in Southeast Asia as well, in South America, a lot of the low and middle income countries, you see that the health systems are really not prepared. Like the question that was asked, even policymakers don't know what this is, right? They need to really get involved. And then you start asking about preventive or versus predictive medicine. On the one hand, it may be nice for your AI to know your genome, your whole genome. And then maybe you can take preventive action. You can recommend and say, okay, because you have a higher risk of cancer, do not do this, do not smoke, do not get your HIV, get your vaccines, right? HPV vaccines, get all the, eat this particular kind of food, so that can actually be very helpful. On the other hand, predictive medicine, on the other hand, it also raises concerns about it's not concern, but it can actually predict, what kind of interventions it should provide for you, as you get sick. And then equity and access is always a big issue, because sometimes, again, when you use AI and genomics, the question is, are you considering all the diverse data set? Are you only looking at Europe, America, or are you looking at Southeast Asia? Are you looking at Australia? Are you looking at South America? And then regulatory and policy challenges, how do you do that? Countries have different policies around this. In my work, when you talk to patients in Africa, who have cancer, some of them don't really care about, the ethics. They don't really care. They just want to get treated or be healed. They don't really care about whether, what happens to their data. And so, and they are really not, across the landscape in Africa, there's really fragmented policy around this. So this is something that needs to be considered. So if you then start thinking about AI predicting your gene, looking at your genome, and then, you can start saying, are people going to start engineering, deciding which babies they want to have and things like that. So it's really important to have the regulatory and policy involved here. All right, so now another chance for us to now think about, think about this future of AI and genomics. What are some of the applications? What can you actually use AI to do in terms of applications in genomics? So this is a question that I will take a stab at the first answer, but I would like to hear what other people think in terms of this. So this one is actually an example where, Google's Deep Variant, so the AI, they're developing tools that can help classify your genetic variants, and so can decide whether they are benign or pathogenic. And that's really important in saying, okay, are these particular variants, are they going to be something that that can develop disease during your lifetime? Besides just classifying, you can think about, the fact that with AI, you can really speed up the identification of disease-causing mutations in the whole genome. So tasks that we humans could spend time looking at and trying to interpret, the AI can actually do that very fast. All right. So, but I would like to hear from you. What do you think? Anybody, who has an idea to share, you can post that in the chat. What are some AI applications in genomics that you can imagine? Before we talk about, I have at least 4 other answers that I think we can discuss. So, I'm gonna give 30 seconds to see if anybody has some thoughts on that. I see somebody has a what if question. What if AI could use a nanoelectronic device implanted in the brain to monitor health in real time and send a message to your phone saying, be careful, you might develop a fever in 2 days, or even help control and manage other health conditions automatically. Yep, that's the kind of imagination we want to get, right? Like start thinking about that. Excellent. Yeah, that's a great answer. Using your genetic makeup for personalized treatment. That's actually an application. Yeah. Yeah, detecting early cancers. Yeah, genome sequencing. Excellent. All right. So thank you for those who have typed some answers there. You know, let's see, I think, yeah, disease prediction, absolutely. That's a good one. Okay, so let's look at a couple of other answers today. So AI for genotype, phenotype prediction. So, machine learning can actually correlate your genetic variants we just talked about with observable traits and disease risk. So, by looking at the gene and then seeing what the phenotype would that, lead to certain features that you manifest on the physical, and in a particular example of cancer, you can actually, through using AI and your genomics here, you can actually identify things like the BRCA variants that are more, for breast cancer, so that can predict whether you're going to get that in. You actually have a higher risk factor if you have a family history, if your mom or your dad had cancer, and then there's a higher risk that you can develop cancer as well. So those kind of things can be, AI can help with that. And then clinical decision support. This is actually something where it's going to be really powerful for doctors, for healthcare providers, integrating, AI in being able to look at your genomics, but also your electronic health records, so EHR. So EHR would think about information like your lifestyle. What are some of the how much you exercise, your zip code, in terms of the economics. And through that, you can actually guide diagnosis and personalized treatment, which we talked about, So clinical decision support is really one of the areas where you can think about AI and genomics, because you can take in totality of your genomics, but also the other information that you get in your electronic health records to recommend treatment for patients, and even the maybe some of the whether if this particular drug that you take would have a reaction on you, the side effects of that, maybe depending if you're allergic to a particular thing, the AI can help you with that. And then another interesting area that's really fast growing is the fact that you can use AI. Uses genomics to identify new drug targets and predict, what the drug gene interactions might be. So, and this can really accelerate development of gene-targeted therapies for rare diseases. And I think that this is something that it's really a fast-growing field. And then last example here is being able to use AI for population genomics and diversity studies. Like we mentioned, with AI, you really want to make sure that the data is diverse, it's not biased to particular populations. And the good thing about AI is that it can analyze these large-scale data sets from these diverse populations and can detect patterns, right? So you can say, for example, if you are Black woman, you are likely to have cancer before you reach the age of 50, more likely than other populations. And this is really, based on these large data sets and comparing that with other populations. And so, nowadays they're saying young people are beginning to get earlier and earlier. I saw a study getting colon cancer younger and younger. And so by looking at AI and looking at some of these, you can actually identify if there are some patterns that are responsible for this, including, in terms of the genes of the people populations. So these are just 5 examples of how you can apply AI in genomics. Now let's look at personalized medicine a little bit. So what are some applications here? So this is actually something that is, again, very cutting edge. That's where the field of medicine is. If you say patient-centered care, then people really are thinking about, you want to make sure that the treatment is personalized to the patient. All right, so I'll give one example and then I'll kind of see if you guys have some examples as well. So example one, personalized medicine, we already talked about this, can predict your disease risk, right? AI can analyze your genetic, lifestyle, and environmental data to predict your likelihood of developing diseases. We talked about heart disease or cancer or diabetes. So that really is a personalized. Imagine that, and this is something that we're actually really working on. Imagine if you could, just get all this information and it can give you that prediction, and you get all this information. It really can empower you, to make behavioral changes or lifestyle changes that can help save lives here. So I'd like to see if you have suggestions on where you can use AI for personalized medicine. Any other suggestions? Yeah. If you have some answers, you can type that in the chat as well. Let's see a question. Can we use AI to help change or correct the genes of cancer cells to stop them from growing or spreading? Yeah, that's actually, related to the, using AI for developing drugs and new treatments. And yes, that's an active area of investigation. Right. So Emad says, for those families who have a history of cancers, can AI help them to avoid the reasons, if known, like certain types of food? Yes, that's actually where this is going. Yes, being able to tell you, like, don't your life, the kind of foods you eat, your lifestyle, don't smoke alcohol, things like that. Like, you can really make active decisions about your life that can save you. Yeah. Thank you. Susanna says disease risk as a prediction. That's true. Virtual health assistant. Yes. We talk about today how, you can walk into your doctor's office with your phone, having an AI assistant there that's really knows your medical history, knows the drugs that you've taken in the past, and knows the illnesses you've had in the past. And then when you walk in the office and when you're talking to your doctor, it's listening and maybe can ask questions to the doctor on your behalf. That are smarter, that know about your history, personalized to you. Yes, I like this one. Individual dosing of medicine based on the degree of the disease, patient characteristics. Yes. And again, that may even come with the drug interactions. Like, some people are allergic to certain drugs or are more vulnerable to reactions for particular drugs, the side effects. And so you may already, it may help you not to take those particular drugs because the AI is able to predict that there's going to be that reaction. Yeah. And yeah, you can use AI to help. Actually, this for diagnosis. Yeah, diagnosing cancer, things like that. One of the big areas where AI applications can. So great. Thanks so much for the responses. I'm just going to go through a few. We talked about the drug response prediction quickly. So how patients will respond to certain medications, that can help avoid adverse effects and improve drug efficacy. Customized treatment plan, somebody has typed that, when you come, you can really decide what's the most effective treatment for a particular patient based on their genomic or molecular profile. One thing I really like, is even real-time monitoring and adaptive therapy. So as you take treatments already, you can track and can modify your treatment if some things are happening. You can say, well, we know that if you take this particular treatment, people who took this particular treatment based on a clinical trial, a study, show that if you take this particular treatment, they live 5 years longer. All right. Then you start taking that treatment and something goes off. And, through that, you can adapt your treatment, and say, well, it's not working as in the study that you've trained the AI with the particular data. So it knows that if you are not responding in a particular way by the time you reach 6 months of the treatment, then they need to adapt your treatment. So don't follow the same type, because people whose treatment was not adapted, died 2 years after. So then you need to adapt your treatment so that, you can survive longer. So this is actually a really great area. And then I think one of the areas that we've actually are very excited and are actually doing some work across Africa and Southeast Asia around this is being able to use AI, to optimize clinical trial design, so basically, you can actually use AI to recruit particular patients. So when you're doing a clinical trial, you're looking at people from a particular background. And so, through AI, you can be able to identify which of the populations are the best appropriate. For example, if you want to give a clinical trial for a particular treatment, and you want patients who are eligible, who have never taken another treatment before, or who are not, exposing a particular genomic, let me say immunotherapy, as an example, patients who have a particular expression of proteins that will, for example, respond to the immunotherapy. If you don't have that, then you don't need to be part of the clinical trial. Some of the immunotherapies today, only certain people can take that because they express certain biomarkers. So that's a really great area where you can also use AI. And I just want to show this picture because it's actually part of the clinical trial work that we are doing that is going to involve Southeast Asia, that's involving US collaborations with Africa and Southeast Asia, looking at hyperfractionated cancer treatment, radiotherapy treatment for prostate, breast, and cervical cancers. And so, we are going to be using, this is ongoing, we've completed certain phases of this, but we're going to be involving immunotherapy, and this will be a great opportunity then, to really use the power of AI in identifying what are the best, the optimal patient populations to use for this particular clinical trial. So as you know, they have different phases of clinical trial. You first start with phase 1, which is just looking at safety. Then phase 2, you're looking at a very limited population of patients. So AI can really help optimize that. And then once you pass phase 2 and show that it's really, really effective, you can start thinking about phase 3, comparing that with other standard of care, and then really going out and having a wider population. So, involved. So in that case, because we also want the data to be diverse from different regions, AI can actually really help in designing and optimizing such clinical trials. So that's a really great application area. All right, so quickly, I'm going to another end. We'll have some time for questions from you guys as well. So I'm just gonna quickly go towards wearables and remote monitoring technologies, where you can use AI through wearables to be able to personalize your healthcare. And so here's another question for you guys. What are some AI-powered wearables and Internet of Things, so IoT stands for Internet of Things, in personalized medicine or healthcare? So Internet of Things are things like, the smart technologies that we carry around with us. So what are some examples of that? That and how they can be used for personalized medicine. Can anybody list some of these wearables that people are using today? Apple Watch, yes, exactly. Smartwatch, yeah, smartwatches in more general, broadly smartwatches. Yeah, and these are things that we carry. Yeah, Garmin, yeah, they have these technologies that we can interact with. Digital pathology, yeah. 2 weeks ago, I think we had a lecture on that, digital pathology, smartphones, yeah, in general. So these are things that people were able to use today. So smartwatch is actually on my slides. So Apple Watch, like some people mentioned, the Fitbits. If you're a Samsung fan, then Samsung Galaxy watches. And these actually have integrated AI capabilities. They can monitor your sleep, your heart rate, your stress, and that can really help alert. So imagine the future. Actually, this is happening, right? So we say you create your digital twin, a twin of you. So literally a twin of you that sits in the cloud. So basically, because we know your genomics, your genetic profile, we can create that data in the cloud of you that's unique to you, create a twin. It's almost like a duplicate of you. And we can fit that, we can optimize that with input data into that and say, here's your food patterns. Here's when you sleep. Here's when you wake up. Here are the exercises you run every day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, these are the foods you eat. This is your zip code, all of that. And can create a digital version of you. And then you can get alerts. So if you change that pattern, if something, your heart rate, for example, your blood pressure goes up really high, and then there's your digital twin is going to start behaving differently, and that can alert your healthcare provider, to be able to make an intervention or to call you and say, "Are you okay?" But that can really optimize your health outcomes, or maybe ask you to exercise more, but that's what the smartwatches can help do and really personalize your medicine. Another good example is a glucose monitor. So if you, for diabetes patients, this is actually a really great way to personalize your healthcare, real-time diabetes management tailored to the individual's lifestyle and metabolism. So the kind of foods that you eat, how often do you eat? You can really predict your glucose spikes. Like if you eat too much in the evening instead of in the morning, if you don't take your breakfast, it can really help you in personalizing your insulin treatment adjustments. So this is a really great wearable or technology that can be used. Now in the US, we have a lot of the smart beds and mattresses, right? So you actually have the company Sleep Number 360, where sleep is really important to your health, right? So these beds can actually monitor when you go to bed, so, that's scary. Like it knows when you go to bed, and the body temperature that you use when you get body temperature throughout the night, how firm, the bed is that you need, your pillow. And so that can really improve your sleep quality. And so you need this kind of these are kind of the technologies that are there today. Obviously, they're costly, but I can see a future where, you can have this. One of my favorites, which I'll mention here is, and this is something I'm actually involved with in doing research, is what you call the smart toilet, right? So every morning you go to the toilet, everybody does that. So imagine if you can, when you use the toilet, there is a technology in the toilet that can just analyze your waste and can monitor your waste over time. And when you have a disease coming, it can tell you. We actually call that the microbiome, right? So your microbiome, or the bacteria that you release from your stool or your urine, can be monitored that way and can send a notification to you if something is changing. And we actually are doing a lot of research around that, because that can the bacteria that we in our waste can really help predict our health. So those are some of the technologies that are coming. And then obviously remote patient management platforms. And these are really good for following up patients who have like if you see the doctor, this can monitor you as you go home and you're getting your treatments, and see whether you are okay or not, and can predict if you're going to get a deterioration or improvement, so that kind of technology, they're actually present today. Bioformis is a good example of that. All right, so I hope you're excited about this. This is actually the future. I know obviously there are some risks to this that we need to talk about as well. All right, so for the next 5 minutes before we end, I'm actually gonna let us talk a little bit about a case study. Typically, what you would do here is break people up into groups, and then you just kind of think through this and come back and give you answers. But I think we'll just walk through this together. It's just kind of a simulation to think about how you can apply AI in genomics. So, deep variant. If you've never heard about deep variant, so this is an AI. That it can accurately help with your genome sequencing. So the question here is really to think about this. Deep variant was developed by Google Health, and it's really a tool that uses deep learning to turn raw genome sequencing data into accurate variant cores. So basically, these single nucleotide polymorphisms can help, these are things that can help decide whether the DNA sequence compared to reference sequence is okay, are there differences, and can, through this be able to identify, any potential risk that you may have. And so it's SNP, so single nucleotide polymorphisms. So this is the power of what AI can do. And so you can even look at situations like indels in this example that I mentioned, a new DNA sequence that's added to an existing sequence or can be also removed. You can have deletions from that. And this can come from mutations, right? So the environment, where you are located, your body is always adapting. Or maybe this is just a normal mutation because of exposure to sunlight, or the cases like in skin cancer. So this AI can be able to do raw sequencing here, analyze this data, and can identify these things, and so can help in determining your risk factor. So let's think about this example here. A patient with a rare undiagnosed disease underwent whole genome sequencing. And in doing this, traditional variant callers missed key mutations, but deep variant was able to detect previously unrecognized de novo mutations, and that led to the confirmation of a diagnosis and a personalized care plan. Okay, so traditional ways that we use to to do this genome sequencing, they missed it, but because of deep variant has been trained, deep learning has been training a lot of data from different populations, it was able to identify a mutation that was missed. So that's a really good way to apply AI. Those are the superior opportunities that we have here with AI. So now let's discuss this a little bit. So basically, in this activity, we're just going to quickly look at a couple of questions, understand how AI is applied here. So AI does help with identifying these variants that in your gene when they do the genomic sequencing, and then being able to see that because they have been trained in lots of data set, and how fast they can actually do this is superior to humans, and then explore the implications of that in healthcare. So let's look at this scenario. You are a clinical research team working with a patient who has a suspected rare genetic disorder. And the previous genetic testing came back inconclusive, so you didn't know what was happening. And this is really rare. And this is a problem with rare genetic disorders, because you don't even have because it's rare, there's not a lot of people with it. It means it's very difficult for you to get enough information to make decisions. So the genetic testing came back inconclusive. So your team is now testing using deep variant from Google Earth as an AI-powered tool to interpret the genome data. You've received 2 reports, one from a traditional pipeline and one from deep variant. Your task now is to analyze the reports and recommend a diagnostic direction to a clinical team. Okay, so you have 2 reports, one from a traditional pipeline and one from deep variant. So the question is, your task is to analyze these reports and recommend a diagnostic direction for the clinical team. So question 1, why do you think deep variant is different from the traditional variant calling tools? What makes deep variant different from the traditional ways that we use to make such diagnosis? Think about that a little bit. Why do you think? And you can type your answer if you think you know what the response here might be. Typically, this would be a group activity. Kind of think about that. Why do you think deep variant would be different? I want to see at least somebody type an answer. Why do you think deep variant would be different? Yeah, okay, can identify mutations not previously. Yeah, it can actually predict that. So remember Labini was describing deep learning and stuff like that, which AI starts to develop, become more even superior, analyzing, learn the patterns, but can actually, do such predictions. Yeah, time sensitivity is another one. That's a good one. Yeah, based on data published, there's a lot of data. AI can quickly look at the internet in 1 microsecond, and we can get some of this. So that's thank you for all those great answers. Yes, so what makes deep variant? So there are a couple of things, right? Deep variant uses deep learning, which means that, this is a big terminology here, convolutional neural networks, to classify variants like humans would recognize image patterns. So deep learning really allows it to be more superior to the traditional variant calling tools. And unlike role-based pipelines, it learns from raw sequencing data and can improve over time. So the more you give it more data, the more it gets better and better and better. And then we actually know it has greater accuracy, and this is not just for this particular case, but we actually have read a number of reports where in hospitals, I think there was one recently in China where AI was more accurate than humans in radiology. It's well established. So this is a great thing that we have with AI for precision diagnostics. Okay, so what are the potential advantages and risks of using AI in this clinical setting? I'll talk about the advantages, but I want you to share some risks that you think. So advantages, there's higher sensitivity and specificity in detecting the true variants. It's faster. I think somebody typed that in the chat, yes. And then it can reduce manual review workload, especially where you have healthcare settings where, a lot of health workers, they are less, so that means that we don't have time to spend a lot of time on doing work. So AI can actually can help the workforce. Okay, but what about the disadvantages? What are some risks? What do you think are some risks of using AI in the clinical setting? It's something we haven't really touched, but it'd be nice for somebody to share what they think. What are some of the risks here? Yeah, confidentiality. Excellent. Thank you. Hafsa, that's a great question. Ethics, data privacy. Yes. Excellent. Bias, yeah, bias is a big one. Again, because the data is always empathy and lack of emotions. Yeah, empathy and lack of emotions. So, nowadays AI is beginning to, that's something we used to say they cannot, but, if you ChatGPT sometimes, you're surprised at the emotion that it can express to you. That's changing. They're beginning to change that. But yeah, a lot of you say data privacy. That's a really good point. Legal thing. So that's a good question. So one question is, if the AI goes wrong, if it makes a wrong diagnosis, who is responsible, right? Who is responsible? Is it the AI or your doctor, right? So there's, so this is bias is a huge thing. And these are just examples. Obviously, AI is not, we've heard about hallucination, and really when you use AI, it's like a black box, right? So it's, it's something that you get an answer, but you don't really know how it came about with that answer. And so those are some of the risks. And again, if you get a misdiagnosis, and then the question is, who is responsible here? That's a big one. All right, I have a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up this case study. So if deep variant identifies a variant missed by other tools, how should your team validate it? So that's actually a good question. If this is the first time it's doing it, what are some things that you can do? And this is something that we all should be doing each time we use AI, right? Like, so do that additional check. Don't just take everything that the AI says. I think that that's really important. And so, some examples here for validating that is orthogonal testing, such as Sanger sequencing. You can do that to just make sure that verify, cross-check. And there are tools like that, like ClinVar, that can you use to do that. And then potentially discuss the findings with the clinical geneticists, so specialists who are, trained to do this kind of work. All right, one last question here. So how might this tool change access to diagnostics in low resource settings? This is one of my favorite questions. How might such AI, and this is something I think 4 weeks ago, I talked about a comprehensive cancer center in the cloud. This is one of the things that we're going to put in there. Really, imagine if you can walk in there and it can tell you based on your genomics, obviously with the protections in place, what are some of the risks that you're going to have. So this can really change diagnosis in low resource settings. And how might this happen, right? If you think about that a little bit, some good answers, reduces the need for high cost infrastructure, cloud-based AI tools can analyze your local, your complete genome and equity, promote equity there. And then, again, the caveat here is that this requires stable internet. I would say actually, yes, there's systems now that you can avoid some of the, if you have that locally on your servers. digital infrastructure, then you don't really need to worry about the stable internet. But there's also importance for data governance and protecting privacy, which some of you have raised. So that's really, really important. Oh, I do have one more question, and this will really transition us to the end. So what ethical considerations must be made? We've talked about that. We said ethics is a problem. But think about it a little bit. What are the ethical considerations that we must make when we're using AI in genomics, or that we should consider? You know, I'd like to see what people say here. Yeah, I see that good response there from Mustafa about if AI makes a mistake in healthcare, who is responsible? Answer, please. Yeah, answer, please. So that's a regulatory decision. In general, today, the most companies would say, that's why the doctor should make the final decision. So when the AI makes the recommendation, it's only a recommendation. The doctor has to make the final decision. So they are responsible, not the AI. Yeah, that's a good answer there, doctor. Yeah, so what are the ethical considerations? Yes, the AI should not be left to make the final decision. Very good, Davis. Very good answer. Yeah. All right. So, okay, let me just go through some of the answers here. So, privacy is a big one. People don't want their whole genome out there available to anybody to take a look at that. So that's really important. It's a really big privacy issue. Imagine your genomic sequence is really like the blueprint for your life, right? That's all about you, right? You want to make sure that that information is private. And then if patients are you're going to use the genomic sequence of a patient, they should give you informed consent. So they should know that you're going to use their genome, right? Their sequence. You have to explain that and how AI is going to analyze and potentially interpret the data. So they should sign off. Just like when you go to the hospital, you get informed consent. You have to agree that they should use that. And then equity is a huge issue. You want to make sure that there's no bias. AI can it's not validated in diverse populations. You have to do that to avoid disparities. And then transparency. We need explainable AI in clinical genomics, so to support this clinician decision making. So sometimes, it's a black box here. So be able to explain to the doctor why that recommendation is made. So not just say, okay, this is the recommendation. This person has been diagnosed, the stage is stage 4 cancer. Why? Yes, because the cancer has spread so far. There has to be a reason for that, right? So you have to give that explanation. Great. I really enjoyed your interactions here. And I'm just going to end. There's no way we don't end this lecture today without, just really talking about these ethical considerations, in a way that, it's like a summary of the key points here, right? So ethical considerations in genomic data handling. As we think about, we enter this era of where AI is definitely, it's not a question of if, it's a question of how we do it. Here are some of the things that we need to really take into account to ensure that people's ethics are taken into account. So one, privacy and confidentiality. So making sure that people's data, I can tell you had an example recently, collaborating with a church network that's involved in Europe and ministry in Southeast Asia and Africa. And they're thinking about how we're working with us. And that was the big question that kept coming up. How are you going to make sure that people's data is private, the privacy is maintained? Can they be hacked? Security, data security. What if it's hacked? Right. So you have to be very clear and upfront that, yes, even though you're going to try your best to maintain privacy, it's possible that hackers can access that. Obviously, we're continuously developing technologies and tools that, can help prevent that from happening. And then, yes, informed consent, we just talked about that. It's really important that you sign off before somebody uses your data. Equity and access, making sure that there's no bias. Data ownership. This is a question that, we had a conversation yesterday with a telehealth company that's developing tools for telehealth across low and middle income countries. And the question was, who really owns the data? If you enter your electronic health records, your information, or let's say your genome is uploaded, genomic sequence is uploaded into the cloud, who owns that data? Is it the government? Is it the hospital? Or is it you? Right? And obviously, I'm actually curious to hear what you guys think here. Who owns the data? If you go to the hospital and AI is used, and they used to get your information, your data, who should own it? Should it be you? Should it be the hospital, or should it be the government that sets the regulations? That's a really important debate, right? Yeah, David says patient. Yeah, it should really be the patient. Aditya, there's ethical considerations related to privacy data. Yeah, that's a great answer, Aditya. And I think that's one of the key considerations for ethics. Yeah, patient. Yeah, the simple answer there is has to be the patient. I actually think, with your mobile phone technology, carry your data on your phone or somewhere. It's in the cloud, it's yours. And even when you need to use AI to train additional data, you should give permission. Nowadays they're developing what you call federated learning in AI. So instead of moving the data from country, everybody bringing it into one place, the AI actually, you download in your phone and the studies on your phone, and then nobody really knows what your data is. It just comes out with the meta information. That way, you maintain the privacy, the data is yours. If you move from one hospital to the other, you carry your data with you. It's not the government, it's not it's not industry, it's not the hospital. Right. So that's a future that I think we all should advocate for. And then lastly, return of results and duty to warn. So should clinicians return incidental findings? What if there's a risk to relatives? Sometimes it's possible that, because there's a risk, if it's a rare disease and you return that information, then if it's a genetic one, then, that may raise flags about, okay, we know that this is genetics. So if it happens to you, your sister or your brother likely has this thing too. So, does that make people start viewing those people differently? So being able to strike a balance between that is really going to be really important, and it's an ethical question that needs to be considered. Okay, and then I think one more. Yeah, so yeah, transparency and explainability. These are things that you really have to make sure that AI models are interpretable, and should be able to tell physicians how and why a recommendation is made. Bias and fairness, continuous auditing to make sure that the models are validated and also continuously improved. And accountability. Yeah, so this is one of the questions that somebody asks: who is responsible when AI makes a wrong prediction? The developer or the clinician? And so there has to be clear regulatory and legal frameworks, each count really making sure that that's established to decide who it is. And making sure that, I think we've all made that clinicians should not overtrust AI. This is really important that you make the final decision, because AI can be wrong, can hallucinate. Finally, AI recommendation should be shared in an understandable format. Actually like the idea of using AI to empower patients so that you go, like I mentioned, you go into the clinic with your phone. Your phone has the app there that can actually, ask questions to the doctor too. Because sometimes you are in that hospital with the doctor and you're just terrified and you're just listening and saying yes, yes, noting every time the doctor is saying, but you're not asking questions. And I think AI, maybe say, baby doctor, can I let my assistant ask some questions? And, because he understands your history and all of those things, he can actually ask some really good questions that can help shape your treatment. Okay, this last one, data integration and consent. Yeah, being able to use electronic health records and the wearables we just talked about, integrating that. I think the future is like your digital twin, like creating that, but that's really should be owned by you, all of that. Okay, so I just want to end. I know our time is here, 5 more minutes here, but I want to say, AI in genomics, this is the future. It's a tremendous, tremendous opportunity for personalized medicine. And I would say collaboration is really important, because we need these diverse data sets and stuff like that. So, I just want to end by also highlighting this opportunity. We have that's coming up with the Global Health Catalyst Summit at Harvard, MIT, September 19 to 21. This is where it's what actually going to be focusing on the use of AI and implementation, for cancer in particular, but also around mental health. I still remember somebody in the chat talked about the emotion. So I'll tell you this. There's a study that came out I think it was published in the Lancet, basically showing that AI now provides even better palliative care, like emotional support for patients who are dealing with cancer than humans do. It doesn't judge, it knows what you like, it knows how to respond and things like that. So this is also changing really, really rapidly. But this is an opportunity. It's going to be in person and online. So stay tuned for that. We're going to pass on information to you. It's going to be an exciting opportunity to talk a little bit more about how we can implement AI and genomics in global health as well. All right, so I'm gonna stop there and see if you guys have any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Ingwa. It was a great talk. We have a couple of questions. So we'll go ahead and get started. The first question is, what are the possibilities and ethical considerations if AI could use a nano-electric brain implant to monitor health in real time, predicting issues like fever in days in advance, or even automatically managing chronic conditions?
I don't know what you think about that lab anymore, but actually, Elon Musk and Neuralink, I mean, they actually, they're developing tools like that, implants that you can implant in somebody's brain, and there's a whole group of scientists and future people who are thinking about the fact that, you're going to be able to use implantable, technologies like that in humans that can empower us, even make us even better. I think the ethical considerations there, really key things there is really the, making sure that there's that informed consent and you really understand what that is going to happen to you when you have those implants. Again, what are some of the data privacy issues, who is going to be owning that data, or who has access to it, and things like that. And sometimes, is it even necessary? Somebody, why do you need that implant, right? So if you have a risk factor, maybe from your AI genomics, they know that you have a higher risk factor of getting a particular disease, malaria, in predicting those kind of things. It can be useful, but I don't know what you think about that lab anymore.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Will. I think you mentioned, all the points I was thinking. I just want to add that there is, even before this AI boom, some of you who might know, there is a diabetic device that can monitor the level of your insulin and then kind of inject automatically into your body. So for people who have diseases, that would make sense to implant something in your body. But if I were a healthy young man like myself, I wouldn't want. For example, like you mentioned, Neuralink, for those with disabilities, strokes, it helps them play computer games, communicate. People like Stephen Hawkins, famous physicist, he was able to talk using computers. So that would make sense if you have a disability. But if you can, I think if you're healthy, you might want to be scared of somebody hacking into the system because there's data breach all over the place, and there could be anything happening. But if you have certain conditions that would need AI to supplement to help, I think it's not a bad idea. The good thing is there's all kinds of genetic testing that can help you make those predictions, like Dr. Will said. So I think that's a better way, but I would imagine that there are people who want that. But the better biomarkers to detect your disease condition. Maybe perhaps look for a test system that can just use blood to detect more, disease conditions than, implanting something in the body. But I imagine that people would want that. So I think that's might be a good thing for other people, but on my part, my bias says no, I don't think it's a good idea. If you're healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a nano guy, actually, like nanotechnology and stuff. But I think there has to be a justification.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question is, how can AI be integrated with plasma resonance affinity biosensors to improve early cancer detection?
Read it again. Sorry, Saif.
Yep, no worries. The question is, how can AI be integrated with plasmon resonance affinity biosensors to improve early cancer detection?
Yeah, I mean, that's a superior area. And actually, we know early cancer detection is what, kind of really, really save lives. yes, actually that's an active area of research. People are already, training data, looking at all these diagnostic platforms. We talked about the digital pathology the other time, the other 2 weeks ago, but that's really part of that broader field where you can use AI and data. But a lot of the key things there are being able to train the AI, with diverse data sets, making sure that, it's not just based on, because like Labanino mentioned, a lot of the work is being done in the US and Europe that's based on the patients here. We want to make sure that we have that done with diverse data sets. And I'm not really aware of an ongoing example I can point you guys to, but that's actually one of the big areas. There's a big question even whether you need radiologists in the future, because AI will be able to do all those diagnostics for you and early detection. You don't need people to do that. AI can do that for you if you just take a finger prick like Labanio mentioned, or have these sensors that can image you or monitor your heart rate or do things like that and aggregate that information and make a prediction, make a diagnosis for you.
Yeah, just to add one thing to say, they're very sensitive. The SPRs, these sensors are very sensitive. So if you can add AI to it, why not? So I think it's possible. But I'm also not, like Dr. Wilde said, I don't think I know any work that is being done around that. But if whoever asked the question, if you think it's great work, you want to do it, please go for it. You never know. So yeah.
Yeah.
Great. The next question, a little broader in scope. Can we use AI to help change or correct the genes of cancer cells to stop them from growing or spreading?
Wow, what an ethical question. Well, when I say that, because CRISPR, you may have heard about CRISPR. People are using that nowadays. That's a big question. Like, that's what I asked at the beginning, before you are born, if somebody did if you're just in the womb, you're conceived, at the moment you're conceived, is to grow in the womb. Can we already know those risk factors? And is there a way that you can then start saying, well, let's edit people's genes to make sure that they don't develop particular disease? For example, if you have a family history of cancer, can we go in there and edit some of the genes so that you don't develop cancer? That risk is brought down to zero. I think that's the future. People are looking at that using this kind of technology, but it's a huge ethical issue there. When you start saying, okay, can you design people? That's a big question. But I think again, this is going to be a benefit risk analysis that needs to be done.
Great. And I think that transitions well to our next question, which is, what are the ethics and potential possibilities in the future for AI to play a role in preconception gender selection using genetic technologies?
Oh, man. Yeah. That's a challenge. It's a huge one. It's an ongoing debate, and I think as long as there's good regulation, somebody had asked earlier about the policy, if there's really good regulation around this, if there's a justification, because there are people who really could benefit from this, right? Like, so there are some really, you can have people with a really good family history of have these kids who have this particular, rare mutations that, actually has a high probability of happening each time they have a baby. Now the question is, can you, apply some of these AI tools, and can you use that information to make some changes? I think this is really something that ethics and regulations need to really come around. And unfortunately, that's not an easy question. Easy, answer to that now, unless I think it has to be case by case. In the future, I think they'll be doing that, but we really have to be case by case. Making sure that they're not rogue. People don't use this in a go rogue with this, because that can lead to other consequences that we're not ready for. I give an example, like with malaria. People have been talking about how you can go and take the mosquito and modify its gene profile so that it can no longer transmit the parasite. So you don't get that. And there's the whole ethics question about, once you edit that mosquito, do you unleash other things? Does that impact other things? That you unleash a monster, that can, it has other capabilities that now we don't have any control or future about that, So if you're thinking about that for mosquitoes, think about that for humans. It's really a challenging.
Okay. The next question, a little broader. If a doctor misinterprets an AI generated report, like misreading an X-ray, who is responsible and how can patients raise concerns or file complaints about the role AI played in their diagnosis?
Yeah. Yeah, we kind of talked about it a little bit during the lecture. I think at this point, the recommendation is that the doctor should make the final decision. AI should be great in helping with the decision. In cancer, we're already using that. There's a work with a group that we collaborated with. Basically, what happens for cancer is that the doctors, they really like this because sometimes doctors work in silos, they're by themselves. They really don't have another person they can talk to, one doctor, one cancer doctor in the country. And so what AI can do is can give them a tablet where if you upload the patient's diagnostic report, pathology, and all of that, AI can make a recommendation. It can say, based on this and all the studies we've done, clinical trials, and all of this, this is the recommended, this is the diagnosis for this patient, and this is the recommended treatment, and gives you red, green, red, yellow, like 3 choices, color codes, and the doctor makes the final decision, makes the final recommendation based on that. But at least they would make it more like they have a second opinion, right? So the AI serves like a guide. And if you do that, and then, yeah, that question doesn't arise. So really the health provider continues to be the responsible person.
Perfect. Then the last two questions are a little more specific. So the first one is, how can quantum mechanics and quantum intelligence help? And have you done any research in this area?
Yes, I like quantum mechanics. Actually, my background is so yes. Quantum computing for sure. So let me tell you that super intelligence computers, AI, and all of that, they're gonna be leveraging a lot of this quantum computing, right? Where it's really quantum mechanics based, where instead of zeros and ones that we have currently today, that we're used, that's the speed. Electronic in computer science is either 0 or 1. Nowadays with quantum, you have multiple, we call them qubits, right? So there are multiple options that you have, and that really brings unprecedented speed, and if you're going to analyze a genome of so many people and so many things, you need that kind of speed. So quantum is the future. Investment in that. Just this week, I was able to, we're talking, there's a big quantum conference in Washington, and all these big companies, Google, all these people, that's where a lot of the investment is going. I have my own work on quantum that I think is amazing around imaging and diagnosis, that's being developed, but, I think that's going to be a topic for another day. But yeah, it's going to play a huge, huge role.
Great. And then the last question is, can you talk about how rapid analysis of stool and urine in a toilet would work with AI?
Yeah, that's a great question from Julia. Can you talk about how the analysis of stool urine will work in the toilet? Yeah, so I actually talked to a company in North Carolina last month that's developing a smart toilet. The University of California, I think Berkeley, is also developing something in this area. And the big part there is more the expensive. People already have some of these tools. So basically, you use the toilet, use microfluidics. They can extract the stool sample. They can analyze the bacteria that's there. With AI today, because your gut microbiome, the microbiome that we have is actually, there's more bacteria that lives in us than the gene profile. So bacteria that live in us more than humans. They say we're more bacteria than human. And each time you use the toilet, you actually become more human because you shed a lot of this bacteria. That's your microbiome. So for those who don't know, the microbiome is really this bacteria, trillions of bacteria that live within us. And so, but this bacteria really, people nowadays, the science that it really impacts our health. And so if you monitor this, for example, the microbiome of an 80-year-old person is different from that of a 50-year-old, is different from that of a 25-year-old. When you are born, your microbiome is basically that of your mom. By the time you reach 3 months, as you feed breast milk, it's slightly different. When you reach 12, all the hormones, as you become a teenager, it changes a little bit. And then by 25, you kind of have these super, like your performance is really high, it's really good. So the question is, we can take the microbiome of somebody's 25-year-olds and give it to an 80-year-old person. Would they start performing like a 25-year-old? That's a good question. And so by monitoring your microbiome, we can actually see as it changes, can we eat certain foods to keep it constant? And so these smart toilets provide us a very easy way to do that. And so these companies I talk to, they basically say it's more a factor of cost right now. The technology is there with AI, so we need to kind of develop this, bring down the cost so that it's not, access to it is equitable. So everybody you can just buy that toilet as an option. Like when you go to the store, instead of maybe a little bit more expensive than the normal toilets, but not out of reach. And so this is something that's coming. It's not a question of a matter of if it's going to happen, it's going to come. And so what it does is basically analyzes the bacteria. That bacteria is associated to particular disease. So Firmicutes, for example, are more, that dysbiosis of your microbiome can predict that you are going to have a particular illness rather than the other. I can actually predict, and so maybe through intervention, you can save that. And then if you combine that with urine, it actually, like when you go to the clinic right now, and sometimes you use your urine and your stool, right, to diagnose those things. But if you go to the toilet each day, and they can automatically monitor that with AI, and then you don't even need to leave that in the clinic. You can just upload that to your digital twin, and you can see when there are flare-ups, there are changes. They can make interventions. That's the future. It's coming. Smart home, yeah. Yep, smart home would include other things, but smart toilet definitely is a big one.
Yeah, I just want to say, somebody who did MATLAB, I think we already have a good, like with stool, there's a lot of technology that you're able to detect the consistency and the pH, just automated stuff. So I guess you just need find a way to input that technology inside a toilet. I think one of the difficulties with that would be the cost of it, but I don't think it's impossible. It's just a matter of cutting costs so that it's affordable, because we already have the technology where you just put a stool sample and the machine can do the metabolomics, just do the sequence of bacteria and all the stuff that are there, and you can tell if it's from a stool. With those who did have a knowledge of MATLAB, you know what bacteria are supposed to be found in the stool and which ones are not. So you can see the DNA, you're like, oh, this guy's not supposed to be here, so we gotta associate it with the consistency or the pH of the urine. And I think it's doable. It's just a matter of how can you do it in a way that's affordable and doesn't just it's costing millions. So yeah, but I think it's a good idea, good thing to do. Good.
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah.
Perfect. I think that's all the questions we have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for being very active in participating today. Thank you, Labenimo, for joining. We look forward to next week. Thank you so much. Thanks, Saif.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
Joker.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.